Hi everyone. Today we're going to explore one of the most important yet misunderstood aspects of emotional control, how to never get angry or bothered by anyone. Not by their words, not by their actions, and not by their energy. Now, I'm not saying we're turning ourselves into robots. What I'm talking about is learning how to build mental immunity, just like you build physical immunity to disease. You can become immune to drama, immune to provocation, immune to negativity. Let's dive into the neuroscience of calm. When we talk about not getting angry or bothered by people, most of us think the solution lies in controlling our thoughts or thinking positively. But that's not where the real power is. You cannot outthink a dysregulated nervous system. If your body is in a reactive, defensive state, no affirmation or mental trick is going to hold. You have to start with biology. You have to begin by learning to regulate your internal state. Because anger is first and foremost a physiological reaction long before it becomes an emotional one. Now, here's what actually happens in your body when someone says something that triggers you. Maybe they insult you, ignore you, question your worth. That moment initiates what's called a threat detection response. The amygdala, your brain's alarm system, goes off. It starts signaling to the hypothalamus, which sends the message down to your adrenal glands. Within seconds, adrenaline and cortisol are released into your bloodstream. Your heart rate accelerates, blood pressure rises, your visual field narrows, your breathing becomes shallow and fast. You're not in control at that point. You're being driven by your autonomic nervous system. This is important to understand. It's not the person that's making you angry. It's your nervous system's interpretation of a threat. The brain doesn't always distinguish between physical danger and emotional discomfort. It just detects threat. And because of that, if you don't learn how to regulate your internal state, you'll be vulnerable to anyone who knows how to press your buttons. Your peace will always be at the mercy of other people's behavior. So what do? How do we change that? The first step is mastering your ability to shift from a sympathetic fight or flight state into a parasympathetic, calm, balanced state on demand. This is not about long-term meditation practice. This is about state control in real time. There's a tool that works better than any mental mantra. It's called the physiological sigh. It's a double inhale through the nose followed by a long, slow exhale through the mouth. Let's walk through. Inhale deeply through the nose. Pause. Take another small inhale to really fill the lungs, then release slowly through the mouth. What that does is reduce carbon dioxide levels and increase oxygen saturation in the lungs. More importantly, it directly engages the parasympathetic branch of your nervous system. And when you do that, you send a message to your brain, we're not under threat. That small breath pattern, 2 inhales, 1 exhale, is one of the fastest known ways to calm the mind through the body. And it doesn't take 5 minutes. It takes about 10 seconds. You can do this in the middle of a difficult conversation, in traffic, at work, wherever your trigger lives. The goal is to interrupt the automatic biological chain reaction that leads to anger. Once your body calms down your thinking brain, the prefrontal cortex comes back online. Then you can choose your response. Then you can decide what matters and what doesn't. But you can't get there if your body is still acting like it's in danger. Another tool that helps in the moment is visual anchoring. Most people don't realize this, but your emotional state is directly tied to your visual field. When you're angry or stressed, your pupils constrict and your gaze narrows. You literally develop tunnel vision. That tunnel vision feeds the feeling of being under attack. So one of the fastest ways to tell your brain that everything is okay is to deliberately expand your gaze. Look at the periphery of the room. Soften your eyes. Notice objects off to the side, not just in front of you. By broadening your field of vision, you change the input your brain is receiving, and in turn, you shift your internal state. These aren't just mindfulness techniques. They're neurobiological switches. You're not trying to escape the anger. You're neutralizing it at the source. These tools allow you to access calm as a physical skill, not a mental wish. Another piece here is nasal breathing. Most people, especially when angry, begin breathing through their mouth, which throws off high levels and keeps you in that activated state. Nasal breathing keeps the nervous system in balance. The breath stays deeper, smoother, more regulated. That's critical if you want to train your body to stay calm in real time. What we're doing with these tools is training your physiology to respond instead of react. Because if you don't control your physiological response, someone else will. Every time you get triggered and lose control, your brain reinforces the neural pathways that say, this is the pattern. This is how we respond to discomfort. But when you interrupt that pattern, when you breathe, when you pause, when you stay still, you begin to rewire your nervous system. Over time, it becomes your default. What used to set you off becomes irrelevant. What used to make you react now makes you reflect. You're not suppressing your emotions. You're not avoiding them. You're mastering them by addressing the system that creates them in the first place. The nervous system is plastic. It adapts. It listens to repetition. And if you repeatedly show your body that you are in control, that you're safe, that you don't need to react to everything, you begin to build what I call emotional immunity. Just like you train your body in the gym, you can train your nervous system in everyday moments. The people who are the hardest to upset, the hardest to shake, they're not cold or detached. They're regulated. They know how to control their breath, control their vision, control their posture. And because of that, they control their lives. That's the real edge. That's how you become untouchable. Not because you ignore the world, but because the world no longer dictates how you feel. Once you learn to control your internal state, you're free. When it comes to staying calm and unbothered, the key isn't just learning how to breathe or regulate your heart rate. It's also about mastering the way you interpret the world. Your mind, in many ways, is a meaning-making machine. It's constantly scanning for patterns, searching for threats, and labeling experiences. But here's the reality: no one can make you angry without your internal agreement. What they say, how they behave, that's data, that's input. Your reaction, that's the output. And the difference between people who are emotionally reactive and those who are emotionally resilient is how they interpret that input. Most of us walk through life interpreting every difficult interaction as personal. Someone cuts us off in traffic. We think they disrespected us. A friend doesn't respond to a message. We assume they're ignoring us. A coworker criticizes our idea. We feel attacked. But if you pause long enough, you'll realize none of these things are actually about you. They're about the other person's internal state, their habits, their stress, their unmet needs. Your interpretation of it is the filter, not the fact. Now, the brain is wired for survival, not truth. From an evolutionary standpoint, interpreting ambiguous behavior as a threat helped our ancestors survive. If someone looked at you the wrong way in the wild, it might have been a warning sign. Better to overreact than be unprepared. But in the modern world, that same wiring backfires. It causes us to misread tone, misinterpret silence, and project meaning where there is none. That's where anger gets its fuel, from a misreading of data. So here's the reframe. What if, instead of assuming the worst about what someone says or does, you viewed it as information about them, not about you? What if every moment of tension was simply an opportunity to study their nervous system, not a reflection of your value? If someone lashes out, they're showing you how little control they have over their state. If someone insults you, they're exposing their own insecurity. You don't need to defend yourself. You need to observe more deeply. Because when you see people clearly, you stop taking them personally. This is a practice called psychological distancing. You create just enough space between stimulus and response to see the whole picture. Imagine someone says something rude. Instead of immediately reacting, ask yourself, is this about them or about me? That simple pause activates your prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for logic and reasoning, and deactivates the amygdala, which is responsible for emotional reactivity. In that moment, you're not just being calm, you're rewiring your brain to default to clarity instead of conflict. You can take this even further by asking, what's this moment trying to teach me? Instead of labeling the person as toxic or negative, try to analyze the system behind the reaction. Is this a pattern you've seen before? Is it triggering a wound or story from your past? Why does this particular comment, this particular behavior have such a grip on you? When you ask better questions, you get better regulation. You get leverage over your internal state. The real power lies in removing your ego from the equation. Most anger stems from a sense that someone has disrespected our identity. They can't talk to me like that. They don't value me. But if your identity is stable, if you know who you are, then the need to defend or prove yourself disappears. Imagine this: you're wearing noise-canceling headphones and someone yells at you from across the street. You can see their mouth moving, but you hear nothing. Would you still feel attacked? Probably not. Why? Because there's no input your nervous system can latch onto. You can view it as ridiculous, maybe even comical, because you're completely detached from it. That's the mindset you want to cultivate. Not indifference, but detachment from reactivity. When you realize that what people say and do is a mirror of their inner chaos, not your worth, you unlock real freedom. The goal isn't to numb yourself. The goal is to become so deeply grounded that you're no longer disturbed by turbulence outside of you. Now let's talk about pattern recognition. If someone consistently irritates or disrespects you, your nervous system may be reacting not to the person, but to a pattern that feels familiar. A parent who never listened, a friend who betrayed you, a boss who belittled you. Your brain is incredible at pattern matching, and often when someone gets under your skin, it's because they remind you of an unresolved emotional loop. Your anger isn't about them. It's about something old being activated in the present. Once you identify that pattern, you begin to separate it from the person in front of you. You can say to yourself, this isn't just about what they said. It's about how my nervous system has been conditioned to react. And just like any other conditioning, it can be unlearned. The more you catch these loops, the more you can reprogram your response. That's not bypassing. That's healing. And here's where this becomes really powerful. When you stop taking things personally, your bandwidth expands. You waste less time ruminating. You conserve more energy for creative thinking, problem solving, and growth. The same brain that was once hijacked by anger now becomes a tool for performance, for focus, for peace. You stop being the product of your environment and start becoming the architect of your experience. It's also worth saying, just because you don't get angry doesn't mean you tolerate disrespect. There's a difference between composure and compliance. You can still set boundaries. You can still speak truth, but you do it from a place of strength, not reactivity. You don't need to prove you're right. You need to remain in control. That's where your leverage lies. In the space between the trigger and the response. The longer you practice this reframing, the more natural it becomes. You'll start noticing that people who used to drain you no longer affect your state. You'll catch your body calming faster, your thoughts flowing more clearly. You'll feel an internal quiet that can't be shaken by someone's bad day, bad mood, or bad opinion. That's when you'll know you've done the real work, not just of calming your anger, but of transforming your perception. Because the moment you stop taking things personally, you take everything peacefully. Most people spend their entire lives trying to control the world around them, managing people's reactions, trying to avoid conflict, making sure others don't say or do anything upsetting. But the truth is, the most powerful and sustainable form of calm doesn't come from controlling your environment. It comes from mastering your internal state. And this mastery begins in the nervous system. Your nervous system is the interface between you and the world. Every sound, every look, every word you hear passes through it before you consciously respond. When someone irritates you or pushes your buttons, what's really happening is that their words or actions are triggering a physiological response. Your breathing shifts, your heart rate elevates, your muscles tense. These are all signs that your sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight response, has been activated. And once that system takes over, logic takes a back seat. It becomes hard to listen. Hard to think clearly, hard to choose your reaction with intention. But here's the part most people never learn. You don't have to be a slave to that activation. You can train yourself, train your body to stay calm even in the face of stress, disrespect, or provocation. You can rewire your response. Because while your brain is scanning for emotional threats, your body is either reacting or regulating. And the way to shift from reacting to regulating is through awareness and action. Small shifts that send a message to your nervous system that you are safe, in control, and steady. It starts with the breath. Not just any breath, but specific breathing patterns that downregulate the nervous system. One of the most effective tools is the physiological side. Double an inhale through the nose, followed by a long, slow exhale through the mouth. Just 1 or 2 rounds of this sends a signal to the brain that the environment is no longer a threat. It lowers cortisol, it calms the amygdala, and it gives you a pause, a window between impulse and action. That pause is your superpower. In that space, you reclaim choice. Now, you don't need a quiet room or a meditation cushion to do this. You can apply this in real time. At the dinner table, when a family member says something triggering, in the workplace, when someone dismisses your idea, even in traffic, when a stranger flips you off. That moment of deep, conscious breathing isn't weakness. It's strength, because you're choosing response over reaction, regulation over rage. Beyond breath, there's posture. Most people don't realize how much their physical posture influences their emotional state. When you're slouched, head down, shoulders collapsed, your body is telling the brain that you're under threat. But when you sit up straight, shoulders back, eyes relaxed and steady, you communicate the opposite. You send a signal of safety, of control. Your body says, I'm grounded. And your brain listens. You begin to shift from tension to composure, not by thinking your way out of it, but by embodying the state you want to live in. This connection between body and brain is bidirectional. Just as the mind can influence the body can teach the mind. So in moments when your thoughts are spiraling, when someone's words are looping in your head and frustration is rising, your best bet isn't to overanalyze. It's to tune into your physiology. Ground your feet. Soften your gaze. Relax your jaw. These micro adjustments create a ripple effect throughout your nervous system. And over time, they recondition your baseline response to stress. There's also a critical skill that often gets overlooked at interoception. That's your ability to sense your internal state, your heartbeat, your breathing, your body temperature, the tightness in your chest. Most people are so externally focused that they don't even notice they're getting worked up until it's too late. But when you develop interoceptive awareness, you start to catch the signs early. You feel the heat rising before you explode. You notice your breath shortening before you snap. And with that awareness comes choice. You can intervene, shift, recenter before the anger takes the wheel. Now, some people say, but I can't help it. That's just how I am. That's a myth. It's not how you are. It's how you've trained yourself to be. And the same way you trained your body to react with anger, you can train to respond with calm. Neuroplasticity is real. Your nervous system is malleable. And every time you choose regulation over reaction, you're reinforcing a new pathway. One that favors peace, clarity, and self-possession. You can also use environmental cues to anchor this regulation. For example, pick one physical object you see every day your watch, your water bottle, your car keys. Every time you touch it or see it, use that moment to take one conscious breath. That's it. One breath. What you're doing is associating a daily action with a calming response. And over time, this builds a reflex, a pattern where your body defaults to calm rather than chaos. And here's something else to remember. Emotional regulation isn't about suppressing your feelings. It's about processing them through a stable system. Anger will still show up. Frustration will still arise. But instead of being hijacked by them, you'll observe them with clarity. You'll sit with them, breathe through them, move through them, and let them pass without letting them define you. Because the goal here isn't to never feel. The goal is to never lose yourself in the feeling. That kind of control isn't robotic. It's deeply human. It's not about being detached. It's about being sovereign. You own your space. You own your breath. You own your reaction. And when you master your nervous system, you start showing up to life from a position of groundedness, not defensiveness. People can say what they weigh. They can behave how they will. But your internal climate stays steady, unshaken. This isn't something that happens overnight. It's a practice, but every moment of tension is another opportunity to build that resilience. To teach your body we are safe, we are steady, we are calm. And eventually that calm becomes who you are, not just in stillness, but in the storm. There's a trap a lot of people fall into, and they don't even realize it's happening. The trap is believing that your emotions are facts and that whatever you feel must be the truth. When someone offends you, disrespects you, or does something that rubs you the wrong way, there's an automatic thought process that kicks in. They shouldn't have done that. I don't deserve this. They're wrong. I'm right. And from that thought process, emotions like anger, resentment, and irritation build up fast. The real problem, though, isn't that the emotion exists. The real problem is that you've attached your sense of self to that emotional narrative as if it's the ultimate truth. But emotions are temporary. They're signals. They're not final judgments. They arise and pass like weather systems. And if you want to never be bothered or angry at anyone, you have to learn to step back and observe the emotion, not identify with it. You are not your anger. You're not your stress, your anxiety, your frustration. You're the one witnessing it all unfold. That's where your power lies. Let's talk about what that actually looks like. Imagine someone says something sharp to you, maybe even intentionally disrespectful. Immediately, your brain interprets it as a threat. Socially, emotionally, maybe even physically, that activates the limbic system, the emotional brain. And before you know it, you're flooded with cortisol, your thoughts are racing, and your body is ready to lash out. But here's what most people miss: the discomfort you're experiencing is not because of what that person said. It's because of the meaning your brain attached to it. The key is in interrupting that automatic meaning making. When you catch yourself reacting emotionally, pause and ask, what story am I telling myself right now? That question creates space. It gives your prefrontal cortex, a higher, more rational part of your brain, an opportunity to engage. And the moment you bring that awareness in, you start moving from emotional reactivity to cognitive choice. Now, that doesn't mean you rationalize or suppress what you feel. That's not healthy either. It means you observe without attachment. You name the emotion. This is irritation. This is defensiveness. This is judgment. And then you watch it like you'd watch a storm passing over the ocean. The storm doesn't define the ocean. It's a surface level disturbance. Your consciousness is the depth beneath it. You can ride it out without being thrown overboard. What's fascinating is that this skill, emotional detachment or cognitive distancing, can be trained. The more you practice observing your emotions rather than acting them out, the faster your brain gets at rewiring those patterns. You develop metacognition, thinking about your thinking. And with metacognition, you're no longer reacting on autopilot. You're responding from clarity. There's another layer to this. Most of us, when we get angry or bothered, are reacting not just to the present moment, but to something stored in memory. That person who triggered you, they're often just a mirror for a past word. Maybe it was a parent who dismissed you, a teacher who humiliated you, an ex who gaslit you. When someone in the present hits that nerve, your emotional brain doesn't see a stranger. It sees a threat from your past. That's why the reaction feels so intense, so out of proportion. But when you're aware of this mechanism, you can start to catch it. You can say, wait, this emotion is old. It doesn't belong entirely to this moment. And in that realization, the energy of the emotion softens. You take back control. You stop bleeding old pain into new moments. That is emotional maturity. That is psychological freedom, a powerful practice to strengthen this skill, what's called mental time travel. When you're triggered, take a mental step outside of the moment and ask, will this matter in 24 hours, a week, a year? Most of the time, the answer is no. But when you're emotionally activated, your brain doesn't distinguish between a real emergency and a perceived slight. It treats both with the same level of urgency. This practice recalibrates that urgency. It teaches your brain to zoom out. And from that distance, You see how little most of it actually matters. And even when it does matter, when someone really crosses a boundary or causes genuine harm, you still get to choose how to engage. You don't have to explode to be powerful. You don't have to prove a point to protect your peace. Sometimes the strongest move is no move. Sometimes it's silence or a calm, clear boundary set without emotional heat. Because when you're no longer controlled by your emotions, you become the one who controls the energy in the room. You shift from reaction to influence, from emotional chaos to grounded leadership. All of this hinges on one core truthing. You are your thoughts and you are not your feelings. You are the one witnessing them. When you truly grasp that, when you experience that even once, you start to unhook from the emotional roller coaster that most people live on. You begin to develop what's called equanimity, a stable, unshakable peace that doesn't rely on external conditions. This is what gives you freedom. Not the kind of freedom that looks like isolation or avoidance, but the kind that allows you to be fully engaged with life, conversations, challenges, relationships, without being yanked around by your inner world. You can listen to criticism without defensiveness, hear an insult and remain composed, walk away from conflict without carrying the residue with you for days. This is the kind of control that doesn't shout, it doesn't prove, it doesn't dominate, it simply holds. And because it holds, it cannot be shaken. You train this by paying attention, by catching your mind when it spirals, by softening your breath when tension rises, by choosing curiosity over judgment, awareness over identification. And with every repetition, you install a new baselining calm as your default. Not because you're suppressing yourself, but because you finally learned how to hold yourself. And when you hold yourself that well, no one else can throw you off balance. Most people believe that the way to protect themselves from getting angry or bothered is by controlling the outside world. They try to manage how others behave, how situations unfold, or how conversations go. They walk into every interaction armed with expectations, expecting kindness, expecting respect, expecting understanding. But here's the truth. The more control you try to exert over the world around you, the more you end up frustrated, exhausted, and angry, because the world doesn't conform to our expectations. People don't follow the scripts we write for them in our heads. They show up with their own experiences, their own struggles, their own unconscious patterns. And the moment you make your peace dependent on their behavior, you've already given your power away. If you want to never be bothered by anyone, you have to begin with a simple but radical shifting: release your expectations. That doesn't mean you abandon standards or stop setting boundaries. It means you stop expecting others to meet your emotional needs without clear communication. And you stop assuming the world owes you a particular experience. This isn't about becoming passive. It's about becoming emotionally sovereign. When you expect someone to always speak kindly and they don't, you feel hurt. When you expect a certain level of appreciation and it doesn't come, you feel insulted. When you assume fairness and get treated unfairly, you feel rage. But the pain doesn't come from the situation. It comes from the gap between reality and the expectation. It's in that gap that anger is born. The mind loves to live in a space of prediction. It tries to forecast what will happen, who someone is, how something will go, and then it gets deeply attached to that version of the future. But when reality doesn't match the forecast, the system scrambles. And often, it lashes out. You start telling yourself stories. They should have known better. I don't deserve this. Why would they treat me like that? And every one of those thoughts is rooted in an expectation you didn't realize you had until it wasn't met. Now, this doesn't mean you become indifferent or cold. It means you replace expectation with awareness. You walk into a conversation open, not entitled. You enter a situation grounded in curiosity, not rigid scripts. You understand that people are going to be exactly who they are, not who you want them to be. And your emotional stability doesn't hinge on their behavior. This is one of the most powerful mental shifts you can make. You stop demanding life show up a certain way. Instead, you respond to how it does show up. And in that response, you find freedom because you're no longer at war with reality. You're working with it, not against it. What makes this difficult for most people is that we're conditioned since childhood to expect fairness, validation, and comfort. We're told that if we do good, we'll be treated well. If we love, we'll be loved back. If we're kind, kindness will return. And while those are beautiful ideals, the reality is often more complex. Good people get hurt. Love doesn't always come back. Kindness can be ignored. And if your peace depends on receiving a specific result, you'll constantly be riding an emotional roller coaster. But when you let go of expectations, you liberate yourself. You become someone who gives kindness because that's who you are, not because you expect it in return. You speak the truth not to be validated, but because truth is what you stand on. You live with purpose and intention, not because you want applause, but because integrity is your compass. And ironically, this kind of detachment creates the deepest form of inner peace because your joy is no longer rented from others. There's another piece to this. When you stop expecting, you also stop personalizing. Someone cuts you off in traffic. It's not about you. A friend cancels plans. It's not an attack. Your partner snaps at you. It might be about their stress, not your failure. When we have expectations, we tend to make everything personal. We assume malice where there may only be misunderstanding. And in doing that, we take on emotional weight that was never ours to carry. Letting go of expectations doesn't mean tolerating disrespect. It means you deal with it calmly when it happens, but you don't emotionally crumble because of it. You set boundaries without needing to be angry. You walk away without needing to punish. You speak up without losing your center. That's the kind of power that isn't loud but lasts. The brain will always try to protect you by predicting what should happen. But if you want real freedom, you have to become more interested in what is than what should be. You train your mind to see things clearly, not through the lens of wishful thinking or emotional dependency. And when you live this way, it becomes almost impossible to be caught off guard. You become deeply resilient, not because the world is easy, but because you're steady no matter what the world does. So how do you build this into your life? You begin by noticing your emotional reactions and tracing them back to the expectation behind them. Every time you feel frustration, ask yourself, what was I expecting that didn't happen? And then look at that expectation. Was it realistic? Was it ever communicated? Or was it an invisible script you assumed others would follow? When you shine light on the assumption, the emotional charge weakens. That's how you build emotional intelligence. Over time, you start to notice that your peace becomes less fragile. People say what they say, and you don't crumble. Situations change, and you stay anchor. You've stopped outsourcing your emotional well-being to people who may not even know what you need. And because of that, you walk through life lighter, calmer, clearer. You're not checking every room to see if people approve of you. You're not replaying conversations to see if you were disrespected. You're not holding grudges because someone failed to meet an expectation they didn't even know existed. You're just here, fully present, unattached to outcomes, routed in awareness. That's what emotional freedom is like. And when you live from that space, no one, not a stranger, not a critic, not even someone close to you, can take you out of your peace.